Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Hyman, an anchor at Yahoo Finance. Welcome to Verizon's Ready for Anything Commencement series. This is the second in the series featuring industry titans across business, nonprofit, and sports. And really, the series came together around one simple question. What can we do to have real conversations with students during this really challenging time in our world's history? The answer that we came up with: to provide you with direct access to people we admire over the next several weeks. These leaders are going to share their top advice with you and then be open to any question that you might have about the future. We know this isn't exactly the graduation celebration that you had envisioned, but we hope you'll find value in connecting with some of the greatest minds and problem solvers who we know. Throughout this series, we encourage you, please send us your questions. You can do that in the comments section on LinkedIn by sharing your name as well as your university and your thoughts and questions. We will get to as many of them as we can during each broadcast. Now, our speaker this week is really well adapted to what we are all going through at the moment, because what the last several months have made abundantly clear more than ever is the importance of the intersection of mind and body and everyone's mental health. I'm talking about Kevin Love. He is the NBA forward and center for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He, of course, participated in that championship team in 2016. He's a five-time NBA All-Star, a U.S. Olympic gold medalist. And on the side of mental health, he also founded the Kevin Love Fund in 2018. That's a foundation that's dedicated to inspiring people to live their healthiest lives, providing the tools to achieve physical as well as emotional well-being. He's been an outspoken advocate on the idea and the importance of mental health. Everyone, Kevin Love.
All right, Julie, thank you for that. So let's get right into it. As Julie mentioned, I know that today isn't what you guys imagine, but I promise you that it can be more. But just remember, whatever more is, it's up to you to set the bar. I'm Kevin, and I'm here to challenge you to write your own story. Shakespeare said it, and so did Robin Williams' character in one of my favorite movies, The Dead Poets Society. They both said it a little bit different, but despite a gap of centuries and a world between them, the challenge remained the same. Are you ready to write your own story? Will you determine what your verse will be? Or will you let somebody else pick up the pen and write it for you? Whether you imagine yourself crossing the stage or the Sahara, you are. Whether you're hanging on to hope or to hype, you risk being swallowed up. And whether you follow the brave or the timid, your choice will define who you become. Just because you guys have graduated amidst the turmoil of COVID-19 doesn't mean that your story has to be etched in stone. Of course, the news reports will continue to predict that, like a landslide, the financial fallout will bury your generation more than any other. They'll tell you, parents, and prospective employers that the scraps of job that you're left with will inhibit your genius and earning power for the next decade. But really, are their economic models any more accurate than the others that have been charted, recharted, and charted again through this pandemic? When I was a senior in high school, a reporter from the USA Today asked me where I visualized myself a decade later. I look good there, actually. I clicked off an unimaginable list that most people would only attribute to a naive teenager. My list of anticipated accomplishments, would typically burn out as surely as the candles on your graduation cake. But I never hesitated. I fully expected to have a great NBA career and to have won an NBA championship. After all, a lot of you have done this as a typical kid in the driveway. The game goes like this. You're down 2. The ball's coming to you. There's 5 seconds left. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're at the three-point line. The shot goes up, and of course, for me at least, it was always victory. But that playground dream is typically eclipsed by the reality that less than 1% of high school players are offered a college scholarship. And in 2019, only 52 college players were drafted into the NBA. If that reporter wasn't shaking his head, then internally he was probably saying, dream on, young fella. But 9 years later, 9 years later, the summer before I turned 28, I had accomplished all of that and more. That reporter didn't know me any more than today's reporters know you when they're predicting an anemic future for your entire generation. I say, prove them wrong. As a friend of mine once said, we all have to get over that self-limiting belief that life is too complicated, too expensive, and too dangerous to crack the world wide open. There are no starting lines or deadlines to fulfilling your dreams. Is today the day? I don't know, but if it is, find your North Star, that thing or things that you're passionate enough that you'll reach past even your wildest dreams. Shout it loud to whomever will listen. Me personally, I always say that nothing haunts us like the things we don't say. Do not, I repeat, do not let your dreams go unspoken. But dreams need clarity. Without clarity, you might as well be staring into a fogged mirror. You can't see or do much with any precision staring into that. My sole focus for as long as I can remember was making it to the NBA and financially taking care of my family. That was literally the only route I saw to happiness. It was my cure-all, and I had it all mapped out in my brain. If you're on the path to achieving audacious goals, you have to have some road signs, some short-term interim goals. How did I plan to accomplish mine? I had to sacrifice time and moments with friends and family. I had to sacrifice school dances, sporting events, even time with high school girlfriends. But I decided that my short-term milestone would be to become America's best high school player. Check. The next milestone, to be named a consensus first-team All-American and be one and done. Make it as quickly as I could to my ultimate goal, the NBA. Check. It's easy to drift away from your target without those interim goals. As I mentioned, my out there big goal was to make it to the NBA as soon as possible, have a successful career, and have won an NBA championship. All of my hopes and dreams were centered around that quintessential North Star that was and still is basketball. In my heart and head, I was convinced that nothing happened without that ball. But as essential as clarity is to making a goal concrete, you also need balance. Believe me when I say there are an infinite number of ways to get to that end goal. I've been reading a book by David Epstein called Range, Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World. David's research suggests that there is no time clock on being successful. In his book, and I say this all the time, he pushes people to be relentlessly curious. Think about how you can cultivate a range of experiences early in life. Take detours on your journey. Experiment fearlessly. And of course, some may look at me and say, well, Kevin focused on one thing for so long and he turned out all right. But as I say to most people, genetics. I mean, I turned out 6'9", so it worked out. But would I have done anything different to dilute my early intense direct focus on basketball? The simple answer, and this may surprise you, is yes. If I created a palette to learn more and had a variety of experiences outside of sports, the world may have opened up faster to me, and I would have had the energy for other things that would have enriched my life even more. So what has COVID-19 taught us? Even under normal circumstances, and especially for the young, everything seems urgent and important. I know I feel that way quite a bit. But in COVID land, we've learned that everything isn't vital. You can literally learn through Zoom without walking into a classroom. We've learned that things that we once deemed important may have actually been fairly trivial. If we haven't changed as people, a nation, or a world because of coronavirus, there's something terribly wrong. Because there are both plus and minuses this pandemic has handed us. I get it. People fear change. I do too. At least I used to. But this pandemic has changed the world as we know it forever. I personally revel in being defiant, not in a bad way, but in a way that defies all odds. And I've always been an exceedingly hard worker. All I've needed is that carrot dangled just outside of what I consider success to push me farther. But in doing so, the stress at times has become unbearable. And at several points in my life, the anxiety The depression and the panic attacks have almost consumed me. If COVID-19 hasn't taught us something monumental, then we simply haven't been listening. How many people on the front lines, the doctors, the nurses, the first responders, the grocery store clerks, and bus drivers have defied the odds and haven't become sick themselves because we needed their essential services? And COVID-19 has taught scientists to be relentlessly curious without fear or prejudice. And that has led to some of the most brilliant experts around the world who typically compete to collaborate instead on their search to discover critical tests and a vaccine to get the world over this monumentally high hump. From lost jobs and job prospects to feelings of loneliness when forced to leave your classroom and campus life to shelter in place, the isolation from friends and family has become excruciating. Cars idle for hours while lined up for miles to accept groceries to feed their families, and school buses with hotspots parked in neighborhoods without internet to make e-learning in the grasp of all students, despite their socioeconomic status. On the positive side, our COVID-19 experience has taught me that people have the ability to interact, create, and expand connections, human or otherwise. The research, tools, and collaborations coming out of this will be vast and designed in ways we never imagined. Major challenges that are typically taking years to overcome are being tackled and mastered in months. That is culture shift at its finest, and it has required constructing new kinds of teams and collective leadership. Some of you will never choose to lead, but you can. However, before that can take place, you have to understand that being a leader is intensely uncomfortable, and heavy responsibility and persistent accountability come with it. Leadership is not for the meek. And by learning to follow, you must first learn to, from my experience, no one can lead without first learning to follow. I was pretty badass when I came to the Cavaliers in 2014, but my success was pretty much, for the most part, on an individual level. If I wanted to win a championship, and make no mistake about it, I had hungered for that since I was a child, I was gonna have to learn how to follow, and I was gonna have to change my mindset. I was gonna have to sacrifice. When I was traded to the Cavs, I was quickly labeled as the third player in our big three. It was LeBron, Kyrie, and me, and there was some tough times ahead. Playing with that group taught me how to be a soldier. They taught me what it meant to sacrifice for a common goal. They taught us all to find our own genius and to draw out the best in one another. On that team, we learned to fail and fail fast before we could achieve our ultimate end goal. So what's next? Where do we go from here? In my opinion, the worst that can come from this unimaginable time in history is that as people, a generation, and as individuals, we go unchanged. Walmart employee Tyrone Miles wrote a poem he calls Hearts of Magic, and his words have turned into a rallying cry for all. Socially distance, he says, but let's mentally hold hands. The game I love has been taken away from me, at least temporarily. Parents have lost jobs. Families have lost brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers. If we haven't learned to live in the present and be grateful, I don't know what it will take. Time is not elastic, so we need to make the most of what we have now. I think this moment in time has reminded us just how fragile life is. Everyone wants to be on the winning side of history. And instead of just taking up space, we want to know that we've added value to the world. It's up to you to determine your destiny. Meet your future halfway. Generation Z has been tested by chaos, and this is your opportunity to put fear and doubt behind. It's your time to dance, to jump, to sing, and to celebrate all that you are and can become. Dream bigger than big. Write a different story for yourself, because as a generation, you have a potential impact that few others have ever had. It's up to each of you to make that matter. Cheers to you, class of 2020.
All right, let's bring Kevin back in, and we can ask questions. Again, if you want to go to Verizon's LinkedIn page and submit your questions in the comment section, you can do so by providing your name as well as your university. Kevin talking a lot about the progression that you go on, and also the importance of determination, I think, is really important there. There's Kevin. Let's get to the questions now. Libby from University of Minnesota, Kevin, asks, what mental health advice would you give grads who might be struggling with leaving school and starting a career at this particular moment, which, as you said, we're hearing a lot of noise, is a very difficult moment, and we're all experiencing it also.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned from at least my journey and peeling back the layers of what I've dealt with throughout my life is that I mean, I said it in the speech too, like nothing haunts us like the things we don't say. I really do believe that community and togetherness is essential to get through all of this. I see, you're in Minnesota, I see, so many things tearing apart our country. And I feel like there continues to be a divide, but as I mentioned as well, like we can come out of this changed in a big way and on a positive side. So I would just continue to pay it forward, speak your truth, and just reach out to those in need. I have so many friends that I've kept up with through this entire time that I'm hoping that when they do come out of this and we do get back to some sense of or some semblance of normal life, that they're going to be able to have success and keep trending in the right direction, because it is I think the anxiety and the stress and the unknown of this time is really tough. We don't know what's coming in the next day. We don't know what new media outlets or news are going to say, but it's really, I really do believe that it's your opportunity to write your own story and leave a verse in this world that'll make a massive impact.
Yeah, I remember hearing early on in this, one expert said they didn't like the term social distancing. They wanted it to be called physical distancing, because really socially right now we should be closer than ever, perhaps. A couple people want to know what you have been up to right now. Kelly from Ryerson University, for example, says much of the world's on pause right now. How have you dealt for that? What's been your strategy for keeping sharp and using this time?
Well, for me, I mean, I've always, as I mentioned, that North Star, like that basketball has always been something that I've chased. And I got really, really good advice my rookie year in the league. And that was to chase what you love, and everything you love will chase you right back. So for me, that was basketball. And even during this time, I'm very fortunate enough to be able to have exercise equipment, free weights and stuff to take care of my body, just because we're burning the candle at both ends. So for me, it's been waking up, assessing what I need, taking care of my puppy first and foremost, taking a shower. I laid out my workout clothes the night before, and just get ready to get after the day, tackle the day. I mean, I think routine, just being such a creature of habit throughout my life is paramount for somebody like me. Plus, it's a great way. I mentioned being connected as well, but working out and sweating and releasing certain endorphins is a great way for me, at least, to offset any feelings of anxiety or depression I may have, because it's those idle moments for me, and I know that a lot of you can relate to this, that allow me to get in my head, and it can be a slippery slope sometimes.
Definitely. And this question is related to that. Jonathan asks how you've handled this uncertainty. I mean, we all have uncertainty. Your uncertainty in particular is you don't know when you will be playing again. You don't know when the NBA is going back. So how do you stay mentally and physically prepared to return? You were talking a little bit about doing workouts and being physically prepared in that way, but are there any mental exercises that you do? Kennedy from Fordham University asks that as well. So let's kind of combine those questions.
Sure. Well, first I laugh because I've learned the hard way that it's a lot easier to stay in shape than to get back into shape. It's funny to look at. I brought up this. I actually found this last night. I didn't even have it at my disposal before this, but I was lucky. It's like it was meant to be. But I was probably 30 pounds heavier. I didn't have this beard, and I was not exactly the healthiest person. So I think that kind of transitioned to the mental side of it. I've actually tried to, I mean, first of all, you got to eat well. I mean, you kill the body, the mind will die. What you put in and you consume is extremely vital. Although during this time, I will say, let me back up, that I have been a little nostalgic and made some of whatever my grandma made or mom made back in the day. So, I'm not going to be pushing up my weight a lot, but, I am, at least for a mental release and to just get away from everything I've been eating, somewhat relaxed. But I think deep breathing and meditation, that's something that, I've been really, really trying to adapt the last couple years. I think it's unbelievable what your body can do when you just breathe into it or breathe into pain. I think routine is key. Whatever your routine is, whatever steps you can move forward. And that's, I mentioned, you guys might say, oh, cliche, you mentioned Shakespeare, but he has one of my favorite quotes ever, and it's "Things won are done. Joy's soul lies in the doing." Like, I love to continue to do things and work on my fun and read and try to reach out to my friends and work on my basketball game, my overall physical health and mental health. So I think it's all an accumulation of all of those things in order to, and they balance one another. I mentioned balance. Everybody tries. It's probably the hardest thing to get in this world, but just finding that balance between the physical and the mental to move forward. But that can be extremely tough during this time.
So let's talk about in normal times when you're getting ready for a game. Megan from Rutgers wants to know, what is your routine for mentally preparing to take on a big challenge? How do you get in that go mode before a game?
For me, it's funny. If I'm on my way to a game or I have my headphones in, I have music. Music is part of my family. It's in my blood. So for me, I actually have, you guys should check it out. It's this, I have my playlist called Airplane Mode, but it's a band called Hammock. It's an artist called Hammock. And literally it's just soothes out my brainwaves, calms me down. And then before the game, I have music that, gets me ready and gets that adrenaline going. But I always like to calm my mind. I like to breathe. And so my body relaxes during that time. I've played 25 plus years of organized basketball. So I have to find ways to get an edge and get ahead, but also calm myself. I think that's lost on people. When I was young, I just wanted to get hyped all the time. And I think over an 82 game plus season, or relative to any line of work, when you're really in the grind, so to speak, you have to find ways to slow down and be mindful and even take a step back and find out what you're grateful for, because I think that can make you and help you be extremely positive moving forward.
Nathan writes in to ask what books you would recommend. I mean, you mentioned one book during your speech. I guess you're reading some Shakespeare too, or you have read some Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Are there any other books that you would recommend right now?
Okay, so Marcus Aurelius Meditation. I just had these here on my desk. So not much is needed to make a happy life, only in your way of thinking. Great Marcus Aurelius quote. My Age of Anxiety. I was just reading yesterday about, where is it here? I have it marked. Imposter syndrome. I mean, I've had that so much in my life when I've geared toward the negative, or I've felt, like I'm going to be outed, or feel like, when I'm out in public, like I'm doing something wrong, or that something's going to end up, really putting me in a negative light when it comes to people. But my Age of Anxiety by Scott Stossel, this one is like unbelievable what it has told me about my life and what I deal with. There's also another one that I don't have, is by John Moe. It's called The Hilarious World of Depression. There's also a podcast that he does as well, but that's one I just recently read, and that's another one where I felt like this guy gets me. Like I feel like this is me in a big way. And then 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. For all of you who have read, Bill Gates or even Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, like his books that he had read this year, this is a big one on where we're headed. So actually a great one for Gen Z to read and to pick up. I promise you will get a lot out of this.
You definitely win among these speeches in terms of props, Kevin.
I'm sitting here at my desk. The AC is broken, so like I'm sweating here. So I mean, if I respect anything, it's like those first, like I mentioned, those grocery store workers, the first responders, and doctors, nurses. Like I'm literally sitting here, like, okay, I'm trying to wipe this sweat because it's like 85 degrees in here. So sweat, that's a great way to offset anxiety.
I'm actually in a non-AC space too, so I'm feeling you on that one. I'm talking about props though. You had your carrot during your speech,
Oh, I had to
and
have it, yeah.
Hikmet wrote in to ask how you find your own sort of personal carrot to move forward. How do you? I mean, it seems like for you, the goals were always pretty clear in your mind, or is that the case?
So I'm a massive, if you could see here right at my makeshift office and my desk here, you would see a whole bunch of notebooks and notes. I make so many notes. So even in my books too, always a highlighter, always a pen, always a pencil. So if I don't know it, I know where to find it. But I want to find this note that I made, which is actually from, here it is right here. So it's about, I wrote a note after reading John Moe's book. I meant The Hilarious World of Depression. Like for me, I've always, and here's the carrot again, I always put it right. It's like my masochistic instinct to just hang that carrot right outside of what I consider success, because I believe that's, for better, for worse, what drove me. I said here as a note from that book, I said, you can't achieve yourself out of this. You have to get used to a new version of normal. That novelty wears off and you're left with the same brain you've always had. And that's when depression emerges from dormancy. So I always felt like I'm just going to achieve more. I'm going to get everything done. And it's all going to be centered around basketball. And that's what I meant by reading that David Epstein book called Range, because, I've been so focused on that North Star and so focused on basketball that I forgot that I'm into so many different things. And like, the artist way and just so many things, like whether it be art or wine or books or, just creative writing or movies and film, and just so on and so forth. Like, I really do believe in my heart of hearts that the world would have opened up to me even sooner and potentially affected me in an extremely positive way. But I just tried to do everything I could and have so much success early on, just in basketball, that I think it limited me and put me kind of in a box to how I could look inward, but also, how I read like a cheap novel, by the way. I wear my feelings on my sleeve, but how I projected myself to the masses as well. I think that was a big part of my childhood and even leading into my early 20s. It wasn't until I was, 27, 28 years old that I was willing to admit that I had a problem.
Just a couple more questions for you. Mark writes in to ask, what are the best ways to strengthen rapport with people who have been working together for a long time? Obviously, you have had that experience of coming in where people have been working together for a long time, and you've had to try and strengthen those relationships and work with them.
I think, and just I'll talk about what I know more than anything in basketball. Like I've had coaches where, they'll switch it up. Like typically we have our breakdown of even our practice. Like we have our one sheet and it breaks down by time and it's very punctual. But I think just switching it up and, doing shooting games or, doing something fun where it's, stepping out and going to, work on camaraderie and go to like a Top Golf or go to bowling or go just like doing stuff that's fun and team building in a different way. That's what I would say, because I think, and also getting people out of their comfort zone. I think really, really good things happen, and it can be extremely scary when you do that. But I've found that typically it's like leading up to this speech or in this Q&A. Like, yeah, I had times where I was a little bit nervous and times where I had that anxiety. Oh, what are people going to think? But it's always after the fact that you go, oh, that wasn't so bad. So like, get out of your comfort zone, take chances. And especially, like I said, this time has taught us, like, live in the present and live for now. Like it's crazy. And I related to the NBA and what I know, it's like Kobe Bryant was taken away from us. David Stern was taken away from us. The game that we all love and is an escape and has a unique brand of storytelling, like all all sports do. They unravel right in front of you. Like all of that has been taken away from us so fast. So like, I know people say, oh, it's, oh, live in the present, live in the present. But this time has really taught me more than any time in my life that is something that we all need to do.
Yeah. So for the final question, I think this is a really good one, and it refers back to your speech. And by the way, I've done this a million times, and I still get nervous. Also, hope that makes you feel any better. And then I also feel relieved.
Means you're alive, right?
The other end of it. But Smita writes in from NMIMS University in India to ask, what can we do to come out of this as an improved version? I mean, that's something you talked about in your speech, that we have to learn lessons from this time. What do you think those most important lessons should be?
I mean, I think I mentioned there being a divide in this country, and there's just people that are so, I guess, underserviced, and their socioeconomic status is dictating what they have at their disposal in order to take care of their health, in order to take care of their kids, in order to put food on the table. And a lot of them are living paycheck to paycheck. So I think it's going to allow for people to be a lot more empathetic. I think it's going to allow for people to realize those first responders, as I mentioned, especially you meant like teachers too. I've had so many like teammates or friends or coaches say to me, they're like, man, I really respect, even like if you asked me to do long division right now, I would struggle. I would have to have a refresh, but it takes on so much more than that. Like teachers and doctors and those first responders and grocery store workers and food delivery. Like there's so many people that are allowing us to live some notion or semblance of a normal life. And I think that's incredibly powerful. I think the gratitude coming out of this, just knowing that, yeah, your life, there's highlight reels and people are, breaking down and curating their social platforms in such a big way. Like all of that stuff is the stuff that doesn't really matter. Like there's the connection and people and so many vital things that I think that we're going to be able to look at and be really thankful and take a step back and really appreciate. I know that was kind of all over the place, but there's so many ways I could answer that. But I think it has the ability and has the chance to be extremely positive to come out of this.
Gratitude. I think that's a really important message. Kevin Love, thank you so much for doing this. Speaking of gratitude, we want to express our gratitude to you for sharing all of this with us, sharing your personal journey with us, with the grads. And we wish you well, Kevin. Thank you so much for doing
this. Everybody. Thanks, Julie.